like to thank Claudio and Improving for letting us host this place, especially for the pizza.
Right.
And he'll introduce you to Improving. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Kai. Thanks, everybody. Well, thanks, everybody, for showing up on a Monday at the end of the day, just starting the week. I hope you guys have the energy to endure to it. People say I always get animated, extra animated when I'm giving talks. My heart rate goes through the roof because I'm very passionate about the talks that I give, the sharing parts. This QR code will show up later in the talk as well. If you want to get some extra content based on this talk later, please scan that, fill out the little form there. I would appreciate. Also give me some feedback. This is a brand new talk. It didn't exist until last night. I started creating it about a month ago when I got the request, so I would like to refine this contents, and I would be counting on your guys' feedback to let me know how I can make it better. Quick word about me. So I'm Claudio Lassala. That's my email up there, claudio.lassala@improving.com. I'm a technical director here at Improving Houston. I've been with the company full-time 8 years, 10 years total with some contracting work there. I've been in the software industry for over 32, 33 years now. That's going to come back later when I share some other things. I blog at lassala.net. Part of the things that I'm going to be sharing today that I've learned in my journey in this industry, this blog is going to turn 20 years old this year. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing here, you can fact check me there because it's documented in public there. Because that's just part of one of the tips that I'll be giving, which is document your journey. It's a huge thing and it's been paying off big time. When I was requested to create this talk for you guys, I went back to my notes to find out some of the things that I can share here with you guys today. I do fun things, even though for the next hour or so I'm going to be talking technical things and software and IT and all that kind of stuff. My life goes way beyond that, so I race motorcycles, I play guitar and drums and make my own music and stuff like that. I try to keep my mind and my life pretty engaged in all forms that I can. That's why I find the cool pictures that I normally sprinkle throughout the talk. Make sure I'm starting my thing here so I don't lose track of time. As I said, it's new content, so I need to figure out where I am with things. Why does this topic matter? So about a month ago, another improver, Terrence, was talking to Steve, and he mentioned that there were questions in the group about the challenges that people face when changing, say, languages mid-career. And some youngsters were asking about AI, and is that going to take, my job or my space in the industry and all that? It was a very interesting question that I was like, changing languages mid-career? And then I thought, okay, I'm 30 plus years into this. When was it mid-career for me? Saw it on the map. By my mid-career, I had changed languages so many times already. I was like, why so? So I had some realizations there that I'm going to be sharing a little bit, and it was very good exercise for my mind to go through that memory lane. And also around the part about AI, which is something that we do here at Improving, which is a lot of consulting with AI, ML, application modernization, business agility, all these things IT related that we do here. When we change languages or tech stacks, I'm not going to be just mentioning about changing languages because it goes beyond that. Libraries, frameworks, tech stack, there's more around that besides just the language. There are challenges and there are opportunities, as it's usually the case. Like every challenge, every adversity may come with opportunities that we can leverage, right? So I'll be talking about that. One of the things that I've been coaching people on that came through the experiences learned is to learn to move on quickly from what does it do? Like what does this new language, this new piece of technology do to what can I do with it, with my skills, with my talents, with my interest in that thing, and then go from there to what problems does it solve? Is it just a new shiny toy on the market, right? Or does it actually solve a problem? For whom? Like, who are the people with those problems? So if you can start here, like, who are the people with those problems? What are those problems? Let me understand. Oh, okay, what are the tools that will allow me, with my skills, to help solve those problems? That's what we should have at the forefront of our minds when it comes to this kind of thing, and with all other things in life as well. About takeaways, we may have some pizza left over that you can take away, but hopefully besides that, right? Besides that, these are the main things, and the whole presentation is structured around these 5 takeaways. Focus on problem solving, communicate for clarity, leverage modern tools, learn from the community, you guys are here, strategic growth. And this is going to come back throughout the presentation, but I'm already telling you, by the end of this talk, I hope at least one or more of those topics will resonate with you, and it's going to give you like some actionable items to go after to continue your journey. So as I look back to understand my own journey, and that's the whole thing, I can only speak from my experience and that of my observation of other people I've worked with over all these years. I walked up to the whiteboard that I have at my home office and started like writing. In blue are the languages or libraries that I've worked with, and I started way back then with Lotus macro language. Anybody here remembers that? Lotus 123? That was the first language I learned. It's like, oh, there's a spreadsheet and I can write some code that will transform that data and do things with that. Oh, that's kind of neat, right? Started there, and then I'm going to start kicking things here. And then from there I went to DBase, Clipper, FoxPro, Visual FoxPro, Visual Basic, Classic ASP, .NET, Web Forms, WinForms, blah, 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 blah. Like a whole slew of stuff that I've worked with over the years. And then with that also comes some like, if you're doing those things, you also need to learn HTML, XML, XSS, XSL, XSLT, XAML, JavaScript, TypeScript, HAML, blah, blah, blah. And then the other things here like procedural programming, object-oriented programming, functional, CRUD, CQRS, task-based UI, event sourcing, DDD, BDD, TDD. Like, there was a lot of stuff I had to learn in 30 years. So it got me thinking, why did I have to learn those things? What triggered those changes? And something that was interesting, a realization for me was that other than on the very beginning of my career, when I was the IT guy, the guy who fixes the computers, fix the printers that don't print because they're not plugged into the wall, and then also writing the software for the company I was working at, so doing the requirements gathering with the people I was working with. Other than that time, I moved away from that and became a consultant. So I became a person who helps all sorts of different people solve different problems with whatever tool I have around me that I can use. So I had never been married to any tool. Like, to me, those are just tools. They're just hammers and screwdrivers. That one doesn't work. Now I'm going to pick this other one and keep moving. And then I thought, well, there are folks who do start a job and they learn that one tool, and they're going to be using that tool for like 15, 20 years. And then I thought, oh, that could be the whole mid-career challenge, right? If that's what you've been doing and you haven't evolved. Like 2 years ago, I gave training to a .NET or to a team of .NET developers working for a big corporate America type of company. Some of their guys were doing like .NET for 15, 20 years. And my realization, as I saw the code, I'm like, oh, wow. They are still writing .NET code the way I was writing 20 years ago, right? So they learned something in year one, and they kept doing year one for 20 years. So they didn't really understand object-oriented programming. They didn't understand the functional programming capabilities that C# had introduced, and they didn't know patterns really well or the solid principles. Oh, those guys are going to have a hard time going away into anything else because that's the only thing that they know how to do, right? So it will come back. You do need to vary what you are learning, focused on what problem does it solve and to whom, right? Because if you're just married to your little hammer, that's going to be a problem, right?
No.
Yes.
No.
Was it? Oh, sorry. I thought there was
I was
a.
looking at your picture that you were coming up with. Go
Okay. So this one I had to ask AI to make that picture for me, because as I was thinking about it, with the whole discussion, is this new technology, name the technology you want, going to steal my job? And then I thought, you know, when I started, I think I stole this guy's job. Because when I was starting in the early 90s on these things, the folks doing programming, they were doing mainframe and COBOL, right, and punch cards. When I started, I didn't have to start with that. So I started delivering value to businesses, creating business applications without having to deal with that. I already started with a technology that pretty much killed these guys' jobs, right? And since then, what I've learned is that in the last, like, say, 30 years, AI is not the first tool or thing that I've heard, oh, this is going to kill my job, my developer's job, right? I don't want to expand beyond that. Like there were the RAD tools, right? The rapid application development, where, you know, people would describe a customer's table and a product's table and a sales order table, and then they would drag the table onto a surface and it would create a CRUD screen. And without writing any code, you don't need a programmer for that. Have you ever heard something like that? Yeah. I remember hearing that 30 years ago. And still, then what happened? People who were not programmers, developers, they used those tools, they created something, and then eventually their company, their needs outgrew what they built, and then guess what? They would hire who? A programmer, a developer, to fix the mess that they created out of that. That's been, I don't know about you guys, it's been my experience in the last 30 years. Like, I cannot tell you how many projects I went into, like, save the company because they were built onto, like, MS Access or FoxPro or whatever, name your drag and drop solution of the day. Okay? Last year, I was in a conference where there was a guy, it was a conference for developers, the guy was on stage selling some tool there, some AI-based tool, where the pitch for the guy, it was an audience of developers. The guy's pitch was, well, with this tool, business owners, you are not going to need developers because developers don't know your business. You do. Like, oh, that hurts. But he's right. There's a whole group of developers that are just so married to the tool, how cool this tool is. Oh, I love my React. I love my Angular. And they forget, it's like you are trying to solve somebody else's problem. If you don't take the time to understand that person's business, you're out. Yeah, AI will take your job, right? It will. So counter to that, for developers who actually step away from their computers, interact with people to understand what problem they're supposed to do, and they become strategic partners of the business, they try to understand the business, right, the problems, the business owners say, oh, you're a technical guy and you are also making an effort to understand my business and my problems, I need you. That's been my experience in the last 3 decades. Now, that has worked out well for me. So I was born and raised in Brazil. I've been in the US for 23 years now. But back then, I don't know nowadays, we used to have this, I don't even know the English name for it. It would be like a job or work booklets or something like that. Whenever you get a job, they have to register you on this little thing, send to Department of Labor or whatever.
Work visa.
What's that?
Visa.
It's not a visa.
Okay.
No, it's not a visa. It's like, here, it was surprising for me in the US, there's no such a thing. Like if a company in Brazil, at least at the time, I don't know nowadays, when they hire you, they have to inform the Department of Labor that this company has hired this person for this title, and this is their monthly salary. It's something that they need to do, right? If you're registered like this, if you're not an independent, and then there's a different process for that. So that, what we see here is my monthly salary in 91, almost 22,000. In 93, almost 14 million. So my thing here, it worked out well, right? I took those guys' job and I made a lot of money. How about that, huh? I'm amazing or what? Not so much. Inflation. Right? So I learned at a young age what hyperinflation actually means, what real inflation actually means. Because around the time when I started working full-time in 1991. During this time, that's when I started doing the IT thing. I mean, look at that. It peaked in 1990 at like 92% a month, not yearly, month. So during that time, 91 through 94, I was living with like an average of like 30% a month of inflation. So to me, when I started working with computers, computers were not this cool thing that you can create games with it that makes things spin on the screen. No, screens look like this. Computer was a way for us to navigate a real, really real person problem here. Hyperinflation. Like, how do we navigate something like that? Where you work for 30 days to get paid 45 days or 15 days later, right? And your money is not worth what you were hired to do. That's how, yeah, in 2 years, you see, I go from 22,000 to 14 million. That's insane, it's inconceivable, but that's how I relate to computers. It was a tool to solve people's problems. That's how I started. I know that a lot of people who didn't have to go through this kind of stuff, they started with computers. Oh man, it's cool, it's fun as heck, you know, like working with computers, playing with computers. That was not at least my experience. So that's why for me, sometimes it's hard to relate because this is where I come from, right? So juggling shiny toys, oh, hammers and screwdrivers and stuff, they're so cool. I'm going to keep juggling that. And then, oh, that's a new hammer? Is that a new front-end library? I'm happy with React, but what is that other thing that people are talking about? Like, that does not entice me. It's like, it's just another hammer, guys. What problem does it solve? For whom does it solve a problem? Can I use that? Because there are things that come up, like in technology, it's like those things fly way over my head. I'm just not that kind of a geek to even understand that. So it's not a tool for me, right? Or maybe I'm just building stuff for the sake of building stuff. I just want to keep building stuff. I need to ask the question, is there a demand for the thing that I'm building? Or am I just creating inventory? I'm piling up inventory, and that costs money. That creates problems. It does not solve problems. Right? At the end of the day, for me at least, what has really helped is, am I making an impact? The people who are going to leverage the things that I'm building, am I making an impact? Do I understand what that impact is? That's what I strive for, and it's really what has kept my career going without me having to worry about, is this new thing going to steal my job? As long as I'm understanding people, seeing people, and trying to solve their problems, people will always be willing to send me money to help them, right? Now, oh yeah, you can do React, and can you do Angular too? No, I hate Angular. That thing stinks. That's gross. Not a good approach, right? Your job is in jeopardy if that's how you think. The importance of problem solving, right? Find the problem and go solve that problem. Focus on solving real-world problems, not just syntax. It's like, oh yeah, I can write this thing in this language like this, but look at that language. It's so much cleaner, so much cooler. I can do this. What real-world does it solve? Now, if you are a programming language designer working at Microsoft or whatever other vendor, and you are doing a lot of work with a certain language, and the people working with that language, they are suffering, so then you are solving their problems because that's the niche, the group that you're solving problems to. Great. That is great. Every once in a while, I'm mostly doing C# nowadays. When there are new language features that make my life better, thanks. You have solved my problem with this thing that always takes like, I don't know, 200 keystrokes to get it. Now there's a feature that's like 2 keystrokes and I have what I need. Thank you. You solved the problem for me. Right? That's where my mind goes. And it's easy to see when people are having problems, right? Just read the body language. You can see, walk around, open up, our eyes and see who are having problems with whatever. People are complaining about things. People are like, talk to people. They're having problems. Maybe you can help. That will keep you employed, right? Many common problems have been solved, right? So like, how many different ways do we have to store data, retrieve data, change data? How many more, ways do we need? So I remember when I first started with DBase back then, right, creating database applications. Oh, you open the database with a use customers, and then you append a new record, and this is how you put data in. And then you hit browse, and then you get like a spreadsheet looking thing where you can see all of your data and edit that data. Oh, great. And you can programmatically look for something, make changes and then close. And then later, structured query language. Oh, that's sweet. It's a little bit more expressive in the way that you read your data and how you insert into that thing. Oh, okay, but all right, it does, mainly the same thing in a different way, a better way. I get that. Around that time, when I learned structured query language, I became aware of Visual Basic, Paradox, Delphi, Power Builder, and Clipper. That was all from DBase to Clipper. And around the time, I was not even aware of those other things because I was using those tools, again, to help the business that I was working at to do things. And then I heard from these other guys that they didn't like Clipper or FoxPro, these things, because they're tool of choice, most of them in VB. It was so darn hard to work with data, right? It made me laugh when I saw the kind of work they had to do. Oh, but VB is so much better and blah, blah, blah. It's like, show me. And then they would show me. It's like, dude, let me show you something. And I would show the X-based version of it. They're like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Like, yeah, we're solving problems here. We're not toying with the language here, right? Kind of like the whole .NET, Java discussion, Angular, React, and I get people like, oh yeah, .NET sucks, Java is the best, or vice versa. I'm like, I'm stepping out because I don't have time for that kind of conversation. It's not like, nah, right? And then afterwards, when I got into .NET, it's like, same thing. You have now a connection string to get to the database. You are querying the database, same SQL, SQL language, right? Inserting data, updating data, and then language integrated query when it came to .NET and entity framework. Same thing, different way to go about it, right? With an ORM, object relational mapping, you're still querying data, you're still working with data, you're still saving data. There's different APIs, right, to do the same thing. And then there's the clouds. There's a way to store data in the cloud and retrieve it. There's a way to store data in the local file and retrieve it. It's the same problem over and over. That is solved. So that's the kind of stuff like, oh, now I'm going to have to work on this environment that uses a different technology to store and retrieve data. Okay. It's the same basic problem. You just need to adjust the language, right? The words, the keywords that you use for it. So it's a problem that's solved already. You're just learning what is the language to get that one thing accomplished. Now, with that said, another thing that got me thinking is when I first started, as I said, we would look at the computer and just see the black screen with the green fonts and the little cursor blinking and a lot of data. Everything looked like a spreadsheet, right? Everything looked as a spreadsheet. And during those first years, we would look at that, looking for data and information. Give me my data. Let me find the information that I'm looking for. That was it. That's what we had for a long time back then. Nowadays, people shouldn't be looking for data and information. They should be looking for knowledge and insights. So I push back hard when clients or people say, oh, I need you to show me this data. I need you to let me do this thing with the data. It's like, nope. Are you a data scientist? If you are, okay, I'll give you data. Like, no, no, no. So you are not looking for data. You're not even looking for information. You're trying to get knowledge of your business, and you're trying to find insights, not just knowledge. You want the system to point out for you. You don't want to be like using your eyes to scan through rows and columns of data, trying to identify patterns with your brains. Like, that is a problem that's easy to solve with charts and with, interactive things to indicate, yeah, here you have a flat tire. You don't have to look for numbers Oh, what part of my car has a problem? Oh, this one looks like a tire. Which one? Is it the front, the left? Why are you doing that? So whenever people ask me, oh, I just need like a grid that shows, 80 columns and 155 rows, I'm like, I'm not giving you that. Right? You tell me what you're looking for. You tell me what question you're trying to ask, right? What kind of insight you're looking for. And once you get that data, you tell me what you are going to do with that. Are you going to make a decision? Are you going to take an action? Tell me what that is, and I'm going to streamline your solution to that so that you don't have to spend time like scroll, 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 go over there, go over here, scroll bars. Like, no. That's how we used to do it 30 years ago. The world has changed, right? So keep that in mind. People ask you for data. If they're not data scientists, you don't give them data. You look for this. This is what they're trying to do. Because what happens is, from insight you get to wisdom, and that feeds back into the system. Because once the business learns the knowledge and insights, like, okay, if that's how my business is working, okay, can we try this other thing now, right? So that we can expose things here in a different manner. Because now that the knowledge gave me certain insight, and I'm observing my business, how the world is going, I'm building wisdom, now I can give you better information about what I want out of the system. And this, it's an ongoing learning, even from the business perspective. So, developers who think from that perspective, let me work with the business, with the people to understand what they need. These guys should not be afraid of losing their jobs to AI or to anything like that. Right? Now, developers who can only work with code, it's kind of complicated, right? Because developers spend time writing code and reading a lot more than they write. Guess who's a lot faster at doing that? AI. So if all we do is write code and read code, AI can do that faster. Not necessarily better. Oftentimes it can be better, and I'll share that. It can be very humbling, right? But we have to do more. If we want to keep being developers, we need to do more than just writing code and, even more so, more than like writing code in one language. Say, oh, I can only do C#. I cannot do any other language. Like, that's complicated because guess who can translate one solution into multiple languages really fast? AI. Right? Oh, take the C# code, translate it into Java. Take this TypeScript code, translate it into JavaScript. It does it really well, right? And really fast. So you don't want that to be your specialization. Oh, I speak 2 languages, 2 programming languages. Now, that's cute, right? Like you're going to have to do more than that. Now, a few years ago, I've read this book. Some of you guys may have heard, The Design of Everyday Things, by Don Norman. It was first published in early 90s, I think. He was like the guy who coined the term UX design or UX in general. And towards the end of that book, it's an excellent book. There is a newer version where he updates whatever got outdated, he updated that. But towards the end when he talks about AI, and that edition is from like 10 years ago, he says this, and that one resonated with me. Weak human plus machine plus better process is superior than a strong human with a machine, but with an inferior process. So even if maybe you are not great at writing code in this specific language, if you have a machine and you have a better process, it's going to give better results than what this guy here. Maybe it's like a badass React programmer, for instance, with a bad process. Maybe like the process of this guy, the guy is not brilliant in React, but the guy follows test-driven development, the guy understands domain-driven design, the guy understands behavior-driven development, the guy understands Scrum and Agile. The guy got the process down. He's going to be superior than the other guy here. Okay, so for me, what I've been learning is I've been using AI as part of my work, my workflow. It's a collaboration between human and AI and machine. That is pretty hard to match. It's pretty hard to match, I can tell you that much. And we're going to expand on that a little bit soon. Here's a tip. Align learning with practical, real-world needs. Here we go back to the Make sure whatever you're trying to learn, you understand from the get-go. What problem does it solve? And then set yourself up to practice from that perspective. So what does the world around you really need? Those around you, clients, your employer, the community. Just look around. You see a lot of stuff, people complaining about things or having a hard time with the heart. Those are all problems waiting to be solved, with people willing to pay money for those problems to be solved. What do they need? Can you help? So I generated this image to highlight a few things that I do when I go out to talk to clients, right? And I've been doing software development for many years, and despite being like a director here by title, I still work developing software on a daily basis, working with stakeholders on a daily, weekly basis to understand what they need. When I get to go out to their clients to understand how they work, I look for things like this, like, oh, you're asking me to build an application mobile first, but your main users are working on a desktop machine with 2 big screens. Why are we spending time doing the responsive work of a mobile app if that's not what they are using? Why are you not leveraging all that real estate that they have, right? And then you pick on stuff like, oh, this guy is working with gloves on his hand. Why is that? Because I've had situations where, we are asked to build like a touchscreen app only to know that the users are, because of the nature of their work, they are wearing gloves for the most part. So now they are like cursing the app because they need to remove the gloves, use the app, put it back on. Like, we're not solving problems. We've built the project on time, within budget, but we didn't solve the problem because we didn't see this. This guy, he's wearing a headset. Is he talking to customers? And is he like switching between his tasks and talking to customers? Is he talking to somebody within the same organization and maybe both ends are looking at the same software, the same system, and they're exchanging information about stuff on the system that they're sitting on? What are all these sticky notes around it? And oftentimes what I learn is they're writing down information that they got on the app and they have to switch over to another screen, and that first information gone. They're not seeing, so they write it down, put it on a sticky, go back, and then in another screen they look down and they type the same thing that they're seeing here that they grabbed from the app, but they are doing that like, whoa, nobody's seeing that. Why is the guy like work standing? Maybe it's a back issue like I have, so I'm alternating between standing as or not. Or maybe it's like he's working here temporarily and then he has to walk over, do something else, and then come back and continue because somebody's interrupting him. Or is this like a station that this guy is working here and then he walks away, he's gonna serve customers, and another user comes here and starts using the same station? Do they use the same user? Should they alternate user? If you're just a developer like grabbing requirements and writing code and you're not seeing all this, are you really solving people's problems? Right? So that was a huge lesson for me. Go out there and don't just write code. Understand the people who are going to be using that, what do they have in front of them? What do they have around them? Right? Do they use any of that information? Like this pile of stuff here, is that stuff that they're going to use with the system that they're interacting? You ask questions. How can you make that person's life better? That's what you should be getting hired to do, to solve that guy's problems. Questions while I take a sip of water. Because I'm like machine gunning with all this information. All right, I'll keep going. Adapting to new paradigms. Beaten and bruised. That's what really hurt me. Those were my main challenges. As I said, I went back and reflected on the things that I had to learn. Learning technology, languages, libraries, frameworks, potatoes. That was not too hard. Shifting paradigms, that's, at least for me, those were kind of tough. Those were hard. And I'll tell you why. Paradigm is a fundamental way of thinking about and structuring solutions in a given field. In programming, it defines how we organize code, manage state, and solve problems. So, and I categorized or listed a bunch of those cases for me, how it worked for me. Going from procedural programming to object-oriented programming to functional programming. That took me a while to get my mind around. So like one example here is, right? At first, for me, everything was procedural, right? You write a whole bunch of lines of code, and then you have like 1,200 lines of code. You end up learning that, oh, you can create a procedure with that stuff that you can just call passing a parameter, and it does the thing for you. But those are like thousands of lines of code, right? And then when I got into object-oriented programming, at first it was like, okay, it's just another way to organize all of those procedures within this thing that people call class. That was my introduction to object-oriented programming. I didn't understand abstraction, polymorphism, encapsulation, you know, all those fun stuff. What's the other? Abstraction, encapsulation, polymorphism. I'm lacking one. Inheritance. Yes. Thank you. Right, so I didn't know any of those things. It's just like a class is just a way to group related procedures together. Hello. And then I learned a little bit later, it's like, oh, that object and that's a method I can pass in another object. Oh, okay, that's interesting. But it took me a while to understand this relationship. And it was like, what is this abstraction that people talk about? What is this encapsulation that people talk about? It took me a while to get my mind around that. And then later, it's like, oh, now besides passing primitives or objects, you can pass a block of code, right? When they introduced lambdas in C#, or even before that in C# 1, delegates. To understand a delegate, like it's a memory pointer to a function, right? Or a pointer in memory to a function. So you pass an entire. I couldn't get my mind around that. It's like you're either passing a value like that or an object, but a block of code. How did that make sense? It took me a while to grasp that concept. And as I said, in a C# 1, version 1, delegates were already there. It wasn't until a few years later, C# 2.0 or 2.5, they introduced lambda expressions with link and all of that, that people started using more of that. But even then, to this day, I work with C# developers. Like I've met C# developers who don't quite understand this kind of thing because they are either stuck in the procedural way of doing things or the OO way in this functional, because this is functional programming, right? And if you don't come from that background, which was my case, like I don't understand that. Right? And then we don't leverage. We are using like link in C#, language integrated query, which makes heavy use of this, but we don't know exactly how to leverage that in our own coding. Like we cannot plan for that. We cannot architect for that because we don't fully understand that. So that kind of paradigm shift was really hard for me, and it's where I spend a lot of time coaching C# developers to understand the nuances of these things. But then some other things that took me a while to go from manually testing the software that I created to writing code that tests code, and then writing the test after the fact to writing the test first. Right? On the beginning, it's like, you're telling me I should write the test before I have the actual code? How does that work? Right? And after many years of doing that, I've been doing TDD for test-driven design for almost 20 years now. So to me, it's second nature. It's how I've coached myself into doing it. But oftentimes I hear from folks like saying, oh, writing the test first, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Right? I hear that a lot. And like, okay, how much time do you have? Can we have a chat? Can I help you understand the thing? Right? So that one took a while. CRUD applications, create, read, update, delete. It's everything about the data, right? Put the data in, get the data out, change, put the data in, back out, like everything is like a customer screen where you can do everything. Create a customer, retrieve a customer, do this, and the customer changes address, you go to that screen. The customer changes the status, you go to that screen. And guess what? You can change any and all of the information in that thing. So later it's like, why did we change that field on that screen? That screen that has like 300 fields. Oh, I don't know. We let the user click edit, they change whatever they want, they save it, and we have no idea about the user's intention. So you have the data, but you lose the intention. The person's intention, the business intention, right? The business event that happens, you have no idea what happened. Maybe somebody changed the address, not because the customer has changed address, but because they called in to say, we're going on vacation, we're going to be a month away. Can you please change my mailing address to this temporarily? Sure. Would you like it automatically returning to your previous one? Yeah, thank you. That way I don't have to call in. If you only open the CRUD screen where they go in and they change the address, you lose that information. Oh, we just need to add a comment field that keeps growing as people, like that realization. People still, to this day, really think of every system as CRUD. Oh, it's just CRUD. Everything is just CRUD until it isn't, right? Until it outgrows, like the business outgrows the solution. Now it's not CRUD anymore. And you start having all these crazy, nasty if, else if, else if, switch, for each, if, behind a button, and nobody wants to touch that feature because nobody understands what's going on, right? Because we're thinking data, 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 data. Unless you're a data scientist, forget the data for a moment. So to make that switch for me, to go from CRUD to task-based user interface, that was a tough one because I started creating database first. That's how I started, and that's what I did for many years. So to get my mind trained away from that took me a long time, right? To understand command, query, segregation, responsibility principle, or pattern, the CQRS, and then, so everything is either a command or a query, right? You're not doing the create, update, blah, blah, blah. You're either executing a command, I'm placing an order. That's what I'm doing. I'm temporarily changing mailing address of a customer, right? You have a command, a very clear command, or you're querying the data. You're asking the system, tell me about X, tell me about Y. It's either one thing or the other. And event sourcing, right? We're so used to like, we go, we purchase products, we put it at the warehouse, so we have lots of products, a lot of products, and then we bought 100, and then we sell 10, now we have 90, and then 2 got damaged, we have 88, and then we sell another 8, right? Now we have 80, and it's like, oh, how did we get there? Oh, I don't know, because we only store the last information. We only store what's on hand. You don't know anymore how much did you buy, how much got damaged, how much got sold, how many got returned. You don't know if you're only storing the last version of that data. Well, event source solves that, where you store the events that happened, right? And then you say, okay, what do you want to know about this particular concept, like a lot? Well, we purchased this many on this date, and then we got these many damaged, and then we sold this many, and then 2 days later, they returned it. Why did they return? Here's the reason. Because that's what's happening in the business, in the real world. People buy stuff, people drive forklifts over boxes, and they get damaged. That's what happens. We need to take that concept and transform that into a system. Not just like, oh, that's the data, we just need to shove that data and then retrieve it when we need it. No. That's how we used to do it 30 years ago, not anymore. Or we shouldn't be doing that anymore. That took a while. This switch here, when I explain this part, like looking at a code base that uses event sourcing, folks are like, it's not what they're expecting. They're expecting read an entity from the database, change properties, save. Right? But it's not like that works, right? Not in this approach. Going from people first, which was my case, as I said, people first, they have problems, we have to solve them. And then, okay, we create the database first. That's how I learned to do 30 years ago. You create the database, and then you start, making changes to it. Then you write, and then from there, it's like, oh, no, now we can write the code first, and then there are tools that can read the code and create the entities that create the database, right? And then, oh, yeah, but beyond that, we were doing like, yeah, you're writing the code first, but you're still thinking about the tables that are going to store that in the database. No, that's not good. You should think about the domain first. It doesn't matter how it gets stored. It matters how well it represents the actual business domain. And then from there, I got to go back to people first. To define the domain, you have to understand the people. Who are the people interacting with the system. So you model that. So back here. Right? Again, that's how it happened for me. This realization is like, yeah, I'm back, great. Now I'm back at here, thinking people first and then doing the other things. In the past, it's like, yeah, we didn't have those patterns or understanding. Yeah, we create the database first and then we write the code, yada, yada, yada. Some people, in the last many years started here. Maybe they started with an entity framework where it's like, yeah, you create your entities first and then you run a little command that's going to create the database for you. That's where they started. So they have a different story to tell. This is how I learned it. Get used to feeling uncomfortable with not knowing something. It may be temporary, right? It will be different. If you've been working, and I've faced this a lot of times, like there's one developer, 20 years writing code, just started writing unit tests, and now I tell them, have you ever tried to write the test before you write the actual code? Are you crazy? I've been doing this for 20 years. I know exactly what I'm doing. Sure, right? Yeah, let's keep talking, right? Takes a while, but it all depends on the situation. I've had people say, no, that's the dumbest idea. I don't want to do that. I tried it and I failed. Would you mind explaining to me why it failed? And usually from the stories that I hear, it's because it was a mandate. Right? It's like, you have to do this. And you need to have 100% code coverage. Otherwise, you cannot commit your code and your changes. And figure it out. But I don't know. Learn it. That's not the best way to get people to learn and follow best practices. So when I teach and coach people in these practices, I ask them, have you ever tried? Yeah. Oh, you've had a hard time? Okay, can we try again? I'll help you. I'll coach you along the way. I will show you not like the ultimate results. I can tell you what the ultimate value is, but let's see what your next step is. Maybe you should start here, baby steps, and eventually you're going to get there. It's like, usually what happens with this approach is like, I cannot do it any other way now. I cannot go back to the way I used to do. Now that I've learned it the proper way and I've reaped the benefit from that, I'm not going back, right? But it takes time. It will be uncomfortable. It's always like that, right? When we're trying something that we don't know, we're not familiar with, it will be uncomfortable. Yeah, that's fine. It's a price that we pay for learning, for growing. Strategies. Start with small projects. Compare patterns from what you already know. So you have a frame of reference. That's how we all learn, right? We learn by comparing to something that is familiar at the beginning. Try to make it not about the language, the idioms in that language, but how you think of it. So something I learned to do is when I got into behavior-driven development and looking at how user stories are written and acceptance criteria are written, I think of problems in this manner. In order to, what is the need? What is the value? What is the problem you're trying to solve? So in order to solve problem X, who's the person, the persona, the group of people who leverage from that solution? This is what I want to do. A lot of people get stuck on this. They forget everything and just say, I want this. I want you to do this. Why? Just do what I'm telling you. But why? How am I going to be able to give you the best solution possible if you don't tell me the intention? Why is that thing valuable? So I flip it and I get to talk to stakeholders, say, we are going to start here. If we cannot finish that one sentence, it's one sentence in English. We can write it on the board. If we cannot finish that, we have no business writing any code. Because if it's hard to finish the thought in English, it's going to be harder to finish in TypeScript, JavaScript, Java, whatever programming language you're writing, right? So it's a very easy way to get value out of it. Once you know this part, okay, give me some scenarios. Well, given this certain circumstance, this certain context, when the following thing happens, then I expect this outcome. Okay, again, it's only English. So I make a point about that because these paradigm shifts, as I said, they were the hardest thing for me to learn. But they are the ones that have yielded the higher value for me. Test-driven development, behavior-driven development, CQRS, event sourcing, all of these practices of thinking in English first before I think of the programming language, all of those are much harder than just learning a programming language. But they are the ones that actually get me to earn people's trust, right? Because I'm trying to understand, listen to them, and be a partner, and then use my technical skills to solve their problems. That becomes highly valuable. Harder to learn, but highly valuable. When the question is, well, is AI taking my job? If your job is to just write code or read code, yes, AI will take your job because it does that really well and really fast. But all of this other stuff, looking around the room, seeing people, understanding their reactions, their body language, as to when they describe a certain problem and they go like, oh man, when that happens, you can tell like that is something, oh, how often does that happen? Oh, every day, man, every day. That's the problem you should be solving. AI cannot help with that, at least not yet, right? Maybe one day we're going to have like speakers all around the room and AI is just listening to you all the time and just spitting out solutions magically like that. We are not there. At least from the things that I've seen, that I've experienced, like, no, we're nowhere near something like that. Okay? This empathy, right? This human side of things, that's where we can shine. And if we leverage AI as a collaborator, heck yeah, right? Best of both worlds. Communication for clarity. Effective communication eases transitions between different languages, paradigms, this or that. I recommend getting better at expressing intent and your thoughts. I've been having this thought, even before I started messing with AI, where I started seeing like, okay, developers who have a hard time articulating their thoughts, either verbally or in written form, their code comes out just as complicated to understand. Right? It's like, oh no, I'll write the code. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm reading the code, but I have no idea what's happening here, right? Because the way variables are named, the way the code is structured, like you cannot really follow. It's confusing. So honing in that skill of, it's like, okay, we all have racing thoughts, right? Everything is happening really fast. We need to develop that ability to slow down those thoughts so that we can put it out and implant those thoughts into somebody else's mind so that they go like, oh, now I see what you mean. That skill, invaluable. Because then if more people get good at that, then we potentialize our efforts, right? Because sometimes I'm like in a room and I'm lost for words in English that's like, I don't know how to say that. Well, but there's somebody else who can, so I can explain as far as I can. I can draw what I think, and then somebody, oh, we call this XYZ, whatever that is. So you enhance collaboration if you communicate, and if you get good at like communicating to people, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What is your intent? Try getting better at that. One technique that I use, I don't care whether we're writing automated tests on the back end, on the front end, if it's unit test, integration test, functional test, end-to-end test, performance test, I don't care what we name the test. They're all written given, when, then, given, when, then. Because I'm mostly, in the past, I used to do a lot of front end, or both, and then I switched to front end, and then the last many years I've been doing mostly back end. I work mostly on the back end. So when I have to look at the front end code, I don't have to think, oh yeah, my Angular, my React is a little rusty. Will I understand the code? Well, if the tests that describe the feature, the specs, are written in English, yep, what is the feature that I'm collaborating on? Let me go find the specs, the tests, given this thing here, when the thing here. So my mind is already focused, narrowed to that one thing from the English language that we speak with our stakeholders. So when I go into the code, my mind is already primed and looking for certain things, certain elements, that's going to be way easier to find if I do it that way instead of having like curly brace this, semicolon that, and keywords from the language here and there. It's a lot of cognitive dissonance between us and the problem that we're trying to solve. So that's another recommendation that I make. That's it's been very successful, and it's not something that I started doing 2 days ago. It's been about 18 years since I started following, learning, struggling with these things, and then actually applying and being consistent with my process. Remember, I go back to the process. It doesn't matter, as I said, the type of test, the type of language, the type of framework, it doesn't matter. This is my process. Oh, but what about the language? It's like, I can do this on the whiteboard. I can walk up to the whiteboard and collaborate with my back-end guy, with my front-end guy, because we are both speaking the same language, right? So establish that commonality, and then we break out and we go do our programming language thing, but we achieve the results that we discussed in English, right? Code as communication, right? Write code to communicate with other people, not with the computer. With the computer, you can just write ones and zeros. That's all it sees, right? It's never a 2 or 3. It's always ones and zeros, right? So learn to write code to communicate with yourself and with other people on the team. So for instance, instead of writing code like this, if customer invoices, oh, invoice paid, that's a question we are asking the system. If that question comes back true, place customer order. Instead of writing the code that way, and it's, of course, usually in real-world apps, this is like if blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, 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 parentheses, or this other thing. So it's like it's a lot of mental parsing you have to go through to understand, like, what is the question actually being asked? I see why you're asking that question. It's what's going to let you place a customer order. But the question is unclear. I do not understand the question. Well, what if you wrote the code like this? If customer can place orders, you go ahead and you place the order. That's where the concept of abstraction comes in. You abstract out that part. It's like, I don't care about how we evaluate whether a customer can place orders or not. Right now, I'm trying to focus on this. Only this. I don't care about that part. That makes the code easier to understand. It's easier to communicate. You can put this in front of a non-technical person. The non-technical person will be able to read the code with you, even if they don't speak that programming language, because like, oh, this I can understand. Yeah, okay. Like, oh, okay, how are we defining this? Whatever we are defining, then make that part also intent revealing, right? Well, if all customer invoices are paid, and they have a credit limit that's not maxed out, and it's before 6 o'clock, whatever that logic is, write it in a manner that's going to flow left to right. Whether you're reading from a collection, an array, making a database query, abstract that out as far out as you can to make it easy to have this flow of conversation. So that's how I try to tell people. It's like, English is how I think, and it's how we communicate with the people you're serving. So I try to push that language, that thought, as far deep into the code as I can, until eventually it's like, yeah, here I'm going to use this regular expression and this other thing here and this lambda thing here and blah, blah, blah. But as far away from the high-level stuff, because that way I can invite my non-technical friends to go as far deep into the code as we can and collaborate, right? People collaborating. Yes?
Yeah, sometimes your code is actually too complicated. It's actually not good.
Most of the time, right?
Most of the time, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because also then it's like it defeats the purpose of self-documentation as well.
Yes. Yeah, because if people say, thank you, that's a great segue. Have you looked at my content here before? Because like that's where I'm going.
Oh, not yet.
So yes, I'll come back to that point, I think in the next slide. So clear intent, it's equals easier time learning how to express it in the language. So if you're clear about the intent, the questions that we are asking the system, why we are asking those questions, what are we going to be doing with that response? The thing that I was just talking about when people tell me, oh, you need to give me the data. It's like, no, you give me the question that you're asking, you tell me what information do you have on hand when you're asking that question, and you tell me what do you want the shape of that question to be, that answer to be. And then I'm going to bring that into the code. I'm going to describe what the person is using. I'm going to describe that in code as far deep as I can. And then you just need to learn, okay, in that language, how do I say that? Right? And then that part that's the easy part, because like, this is something that I mentioned to people. Paradigm shift. For me, in the past, it was very hard in English. I would say a sentence something like, hey, yesterday I bought a car, red, expensive. Everybody here understands that, right? But it's wrong. The structure of the language is wrong. But it's like, yeah, an expensive red car. It's like, wait, what was that? Expensive red car? Why not red, expensive car? Oh, it's because there's an order of, like, how do I know that? Right? That's the paradigm shift. Because for me, in the past, it's like, well, I think the noun first and then the qualifiers later. Well, in English, you have to think, you have to switch your mind to put all of the other stuff before the noun. That to me is like, still don't make sense, right? Still does not make sense to me. But that's the kind of stuff. So if you make your intent clear, then it's a matter of just like, okay, in that programming language, how do I express that thing? Okay? Team communication. Articulate needs and challenges clearly. Right? So that everybody, and ask the question, does everybody on the team understand the problem that you're trying to solve? When you're in a sprint planning session, in a backlog refinement, you have the team, you have the business stakeholders, you know, look around the room. Like the business people are describing their problems, and then the developers, are they looking at their computer, looking up, you know, what's the latest framework, you know, front-end framework or whatever? Like, do people understand the actual problem we're trying to solve? If they don't, ask the question. That's the time to ask the question, so that you don't go program some solution, deploy it, bring it to the stakeholders, and the stakeholders like, nope, that's not at all what we meant. Back to the drawing board, and you keep going, back and forth. And depending on the process, like, well, for that, we need to create the database, create stored procedures, because there's a policy to access the data through stored procedures, and then you have to create the code here, and then you have to create the API here, and then you have to create the UI, and then you have to put the buttons, and then the stakeholder said, that's not at all what we need. Go all the way back. Like, that's very expensive, right? That's very expensive. If you have the people in the room who can give you clarity, leverage that. That's the cheapest way to come up with solutions, right? So that, and then when you follow that process, guess what? That round trip of like you gathering that information and then developing something, putting it in front of people, they go like, yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, now that I see it in front of me like that, can we make that blue instead of green? Can we move it to the left? Can we also bring this other thing here? You can communicate based on feedback on the thing that you built, right? Not to obliterate what you've created, but to enhance, because now they can see the thing that they were asking for. And oftentimes, I've had situations where we deliver exactly what people asked. They look at it like, ooh, yeah, thanks for doing exactly what we asked you, but now that we see it in front of us, yeah, we were wrong. So what is the shortest route to put something in front of people? And what I've been doing is even like walk up to the drawing board and drawing. There is a screen here, there is a list here, there is a button here. Oh, instead of making that a button, can we make it a drop down? Or, oh, can we also bring this other data? Yeah, sure. Here, the marker. Oh, but it's expensive to have that people in the room. Well, it's even more expensive if they have to be coming back to tell you over and over, or in different ways, what is it that they need? Not what they want, what they need. Sometimes they don't know what they need. They tell you what they want. Once they see what you give, they're like, oh, I don't think that's what we actually need. Right? So we want to work on those things. Explain problems in plain language before coding. That's a big thing for me. It's like if you cannot explain the thing you're trying to solve in English, do not write any code. Please, just don't. Right? Now, if you can only explain something in code, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, ever had this situation. You're talking to a developer like, oh, can you explain that thing to me? The person's like, hold on, let me just write the code and show it to you. It's like, wait. So you cannot articulate what you're going to be doing in English, but you can write the code to solve the problem. Right? And then what happens is that the explaining code, like pointing, like looking at some code and having, say, a developer explain what, Guess what can do that really quick nowadays? AI, right? Say, AI, explain this code. And add some comments there. Oh, loop through numbers from 1 to 10. 4, 1 to 10. It's like, pfft, what's the value of having comment like that? Or check if the number is da-da-da. Well, yeah, I can see that. Unless I'm like learning the language, I don't know what those symbols mean. Okay. But oftentimes, that's not what we want explanation on. When we're talking to somebody, so the developer's like, I don't want you to explain those bits here. So here's something that, and then speaking to like the documentation and self-describing code, 2 days ago when I was preparing for this talk, I decided to point an AI tool, to one of the classes in my code base that it's a class that leverages event sourcing. This is a reduced view so that we can see it on the slide here. It represents a lot at the warehouse, like a lot of potatoes, a lot of bananas. It has a number, what type of item is that, when was the last received date, what is the quantity due in, we have quantity on hand, quantity available to sell, and then we have methods like receive. You received a certain quantity of that thing. And then there's other properties that come in. You have some code that process that event. And then another method that applies that data to that entity, to that aggregate, right? So this is the code. Notice there's no comment there. We just try to name things after what they are, right, and what they're intended to do. So I pointed AI, and I prompted AI with the following. Find the tests for the lot class and explain what features and scenarios this class supports. Because that's more interesting for the business, right? It's not like the C# nuances of the event sourcing, blah, blah, blah. It's like, for my business, this code that's written, what features does it support? Right? Because if it's a feature that brings a lot of value to the business, do we have enough tests around that? Because, yeah, if that feature is not working, we can lose money, or we may not make as much money. If that's, if they're a for-profit business, they want to know. And then it gave me, this is straight out of what AI gave me. The lot class represents an aggregate entity in the inventory domain, and it's heavily associated with operations such as receiving, allocating, billing, and adjusting inventory quantities related to lots of items. Below is an explanation of its supported features and scenarios inferred from the provided data and variable usages.
Back up.
Yes.
Go up to the top again.
The prompt?
Yeah, that's the actual prompt.
That's the prompt. This is what I told it.
And you gave it to what? Gemini or ChatGPT or what?
This is Rider AI, JetBrains Rider. It has an AI assistant, and in this case, it was using GPT-4 as the model. Okay?
And it turned out this?
And it turned out this, right? It tells me key features and support. Lot creation. This is the bit of information that we use for lot creation. What is the relevant event that triggers that? Receiving items. A lot supports receiving quantities of an item either incrementally or in full. This is used in inventory scenarios when items for the lot are delivered over time or in one batch. The lot adjusts relevant attributes like quantity due in, on hand, available to sell. Relevant methods, this is the method. Relevant event, lot received. It did that for all the bits and pieces that it found, right? And then it found stuff about snapshotting that we do in the code, right? Snapshotting for inventory states at different points in time. They track quantity on hand and related metrics to generate inventory histories and reports. Quantity transformation, lot extensions, scenarios covered, inventory management for receiving, billing, picking, returning items, sales order integration via picking and allocation strategies, manual corrections, audit trailing via event sourcing and historical snapshots, reporting, da-da-dee-da-da-da-ba-da-da-ba-da-da.
That's pretty awesome. You need to write like documentation because they regenerate all that stuff. I mean, you just have to do minor edits on it.
I mean, it wasn't just that one code block that generated all those.
I pointed at the class, so I had in the context, I had the class,
Yeah.
right? And I told it to go look for whatever references.
I'm saying it wasn't just from that one screen.
No.
Okay,
So it had the class, and as I told it, go find the tests,
That's fine.
the references, so that you can get the verbiage, because in the test we have the scenarios.
Yeah, I went to the whole lot class is the point. Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
No, it's fine, I just.
Yep,
I
it
was
went.
like, how did you possibly derive all this?
Yeah, no. Through the whole class, like all the methods, all the events that it found, how it affects the different properties, the different quantities. Because that's the other thing that the business stakeholders, they ask, like, oh, when this thing happens, what quantities in inventory does it change? Does it change quantity available to sell? Does it change quantity to win? Does it? This guy told it, because it found that information there, and it documented like this. Now, it works really well for that because the team has the process of naming properties and classes and methods. Like we spend time when we do pair programming, when we do pull request reviews, we ask these questions like, why did you name this? What does that reflect? Let's look at the user story. Wait, what are they looking for? And sometimes we name a thing, a property one way, and it's like, that's not really what that thing means. Or it's not how, when we're in the room with the stakeholders, that's not how they refer to that piece of data, that piece of insight that they're looking for. So we listen. That's the other thing. We're listening to that, and then we incorporate that into the code. And then we tell AI, document this. It spits back out what we heard from the business. So if the business says, oh, do you guys write code comments? No, we don't. Oh, isn't that a good practice to write code comments? Like, we just write the code in a way that's self-describable, and then now pointing AI to it, it will give you, like, what kind of documentation do you want? We ask the tool to create. It's great at that. So human plus machine plus a better process, it gives you some, like, it's like invaluable output. So developers who learn to take care of how they write code, they write clean code, they take their time to name things properly, these developers using AI, they will take the job of developers who are not using AI, or not following those processes.
Right.
Okay? So that's the kind of lesson that I want you guys to pay attention to. Like, are we following good practices? Are we taking the time? Are we listening to people? Are we building empathy, building trust with the other people that we're serving? Because then AI will, like, you know, you're going to skyrocket. Leveraging modern tools. When you're learning something new, make sure that you're using an IDE. I mean, if you're doing any kind of development, you should be using an IDE. You're not just using a plain vanilla text editor. And whichever IDE you use, there's plenty of them. They will accelerate your learning. Make sure to find good IDEs. There's a variety of them. Make sure that you learn how to use them well. Because oftentimes I see developers using, like, state-of-the-art IDE, and they could be using just, like, Notepad on a PC or text edit on a Mac or whatever. Because, like, you're really just writing code there, and you're not using refactoring tools. You're not using, like, shortcuts to navigate your project. You're not using code analysis that the tools. It's like, why are you using this big app, you know, for not doing it? It's like, learn how to use the IDE well. Make it a practice. Say, I'm going to spend this month learning the main shortcuts that I can be using to speed up the way I work with this tool. I'm going to spend another month just looking at features that they are there and I have no idea what they are there for. Spend 10 minutes. Look up on YouTube. It's like, oh, this has been under my nose the whole time. It happens to me a lot with tools that I've been using for 10, 15 years. Like, are you kidding me right now that this thing has been there for how long? Or like 15 years. Like, you have to keep doing that. Make that a practice. Use the tool to learn new languages or library features. When a new language version comes out, the tools get updated, and they will tell you about the features. When I went away from .NET for a while, for years, to Ruby on Rails, I missed like maybe 3 C# versions. When I came back to .NET, I would write code based on 3 versions ago of C#. The tool would tell me, hey, did you know there's a feature in C# that you can rewrite this in this manner? For instance, pattern matching. When they've added pattern matching to C#, like, wow, I didn't know that from other languages that I used. So even nowadays, I still haven't like really learn the syntax properly. So I end up like, oh, I'm going to learn the way I know, and then I'm going to hit the shortcut in my tool that's going to refactor it into pattern matching because I like it better. I don't think that way yet. I'm still thinking like for some of these features, car, red, expensive. And then I hit the shortcut, expensive red car. And that's why the title of the talk, Code Fluent. I have fluency in coding because I'm not getting tied into how do you say this, how do you say that? Just do it and let the tool help you along the way. Learn best practice. The good IDEs will tell you, hey, this code you wrote, it compiles, it works, but there's a better way, a better pattern that you could apply for that. Let the tool tell you, and then go like, oh, I didn't know I could do it that way. So you learn it. You let the tool teach you, right? Makes it a lot easier. When I went from C# to Ruby, similar thing. I use the same kind of IDE in Ruby that I use in C#. So when I was learning a new language, I didn't have to learn a new IDE. I was using like the same shortcuts to navigate the project, the same shortcuts to refactor and extract a method or introduce a variable or rename a variable. So those things I could already, take for granted because I was using the same tool. So I could focus on leveraging the tool to teach me what I was doing wrong. So yeah, if you're using Visual Studio or VS Code or whatever the tool is, make sure you use it well. If you're using any of these tools nowadays, they all have some sort of AI agent, like a chat, that will be looking at your code and suggesting things. You talk to the thing and it's amazing. If you guys haven't tried, it is ridiculous the kind of stuff that it can do. Experiment with that. If you're using this, though, on client's code, make sure that you have the little setting they all have to not share the data to, quote unquote, improve their model for you and for other people. Because you may be violating data privacy for your clients. So you verify with the client first if they allow you to use a tool. If they do, ensure that you have that setting. Some clients will say you can, but we have to give you the license for that, because then they use the business version, which ensures the data privacy and all of that. Make sure you do the proper thing, but like, try it out. At least try it out like on your personal project, like experiment and see what kind of stuff is possible. Learn what can it do, what can I do with it, what problems does it solve, who has those problems, because now I have a better, faster, easier way to help them. We're almost there, I think. Let's see. My tool of choice has been JetBrains Rider. If anybody asks, is what I've been using for several years now. But again, pick something, try different ones, see what works best for you. Make it comfortable for you, and then leverage it. Another technique that I use is when I have to learn a new language, library, framework, what have you, I first learn how to write tests in that language for that library. That's the first thing I try to learn. So when I went into Ruby on Rails, that's what I did. How do I write tests here? When I came back to .NET and then started doing some React development, same things, like how do I write tests for React components, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, you use jest, and then this is how you, oh, okay, look at how I describe. Some functionality given when then. So it changes the syntax or whatever, but in the bulk of it, I'm thinking English, I'm describing in English. I start there, and it's like, okay, now what? How do I write whatever I write? Right? And then from there, once you have a test passing, even if you wrote like questionable React or Angular or whatever, then you ask a buddy of yours, hey, can you look it over and see if I'm not saying car, red, expensive? Can you help me restructure this? Right? And as they do, the test should still pass. So it's a great technique to learn that. AI is a resource. You can ask AI, ChatGPT, or what have you. Teach me React, Angular, Java, C#, this, that, or the other. It will create a lesson plan for you, and you can use that to learn, right? How do you say do the thing in whatever language? When I came back to, actually this happened like 2-3 weeks ago. I was like doing some pairing with my teammate, doing some C# stuff, and I'm like, I remember doing this kind of, solving this problem in Ruby, doing this. AI, how do you do this Ruby thing in C#? Oh, thank you. And the conversation keep code fluent, right? We didn't stop our pairing session with minutia of language tidbits. Like, just ask, because it's like I know exactly how to articulate what I need. I tell AI, and it gives me back, and we keep moving. We keep focused. We don't lose track of the problem you're trying to solve, right? AI can make you humble. A few weeks ago, I don't know if any of you guys are in C# land or .NET, and you've heard of the Fluent assertions situation where it's an open source library that got acquired by a company, and now they're charging $130 per seat per developer, right? And then .NET community is like, dang it, that's kind of messy. We're going to have to replace that. So I went the route of replacing it using AI, a mix of AI in my process of how I wrote my tests. In this solution, I have like almost 3,000 tests. It took me about 6 hours to have the code ported over to a different open source library.
Wow.
If I didn't have that, it would easily take me like 2 or 3 weeks, easily.
Oh, wow.
It would have, 3,000 tests, it wouldn't have taken me 2 or 3 weeks to get that done. With 6 hours, again, because of the process, how I write my tests, and because I used AI to help me, there was one thing that's like, oh, on the new library, they don't have this method here. I'm like, okay. I've been doing C# for like 23 years. I know how to implement that method, but I don't have the time for that. Hey, AI, I didn't tell it, create a method like this. I said, this is what I have, the input. This is the output that I want. I explained my intent. It gave me the solution. I look at it, it's like, oh, dang, that's better than what I had in mind. Right? The code that it wrote is like, oh, I didn't even think of doing that way. That is better, that is faster, and it does exactly, or it gives me back exactly what I told it that I wanted as the outcome. So do better, get better at explaining your intent. Tell AI your intent, it will give you ways to get there. Because you can say, I didn't like this approach, try this other one. Now this other one. Or even if you keep asking the same question, it may give you different answers. Right? So get good at expressing needs. What is it that you need?
Are you using AI to help you write those tests? Or are you doing that part yourself and then using the AI to fill in the implementation?
That.
Okay.
Because, so people ask that question a lot, like, oh, now you use AI, you just point AI to your code and tell it to write tests. I would only do that if I'm joining a project that has legacy code I don't know anything about, and there are no tests for it, and somebody says, well, that feature in our project, that's the money maker. Oh, and you have to make a change to it. Oh, do we have tests? No. Okay, AI, look at this class and write all the possible tests you can think of. So it documents or it exercises how it is currently implemented, and then I'll work my way from there. Because I do not just TDD, but I do BDD. I do behavior-driven development first, and then I work my way in. So I take the time to think through my given when thens. Even during a planning session with our product owner, I write those out, and then I write the test in that manner, and then from there, I'm starting to ask AI, now complete the stuff. And oftentimes it's like, depending on what I'm writing tests for, if I have something similar in another part of the project, I just refer to it and I say, finish this test and use that other one as an example. And then it's pretty amazing what it does. It's like, yeah, you have to go in and refine things, but it's like, yeah, I would have spent like 15 minutes doing that by hand. Bloop, it's there. And sometimes enhancing, like I already have tests written, and now I need there's a requirement change or a new feature that's built on top of that one. Then I may write that new, okay, the new case or context is the following, so I write my given when then, like go ahead and finish it off. And now, because I'm extending a test that already exists, then it does even better. because it finds like pretty much everything that I would do next, it knows because it's finding behind the curtain how I'm doing that. And oftentimes from the test to the implementation, that is pretty mind-boggling. Like the other day, maybe about 2 months ago, when I tried this thing where I was telling it to do like, I meant it to just like create a local field and assign a parameter to that local field. But I saw this fix with AI or implement with AI in Rider, and I said, oh, let me give that a shot. I'm like, whoa, whoa! It literally like did the work that I would spend the next like hour or two doing. It did it because it found other code similar to the name of the command that I was handling, and it brought in the repository, the query, the return, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I would be doing. Are you taking my job? No, because I was also the one talking to the product owner to come up with, okay, that's what we need. That's the solution we need. Just write the code for me, right? So that's a big deal. Learning from the community, that's why we're here, right? So you guys are already like knocking this out of the park. Leverage the community as much as you can. Help out the community. It supports transitions. In every single transition I've had, there was always a community involved. All the way back then when I was doing Clipper and I had to transition over to FoxPro, that one started the journey. Like if it wasn't for that, I would not be here today talking to you guys, you know, after having migrated to the US 23 years ago. It was because of that, because I found a community in Brazil still at the time that helped me make that transition. Right? It's like, okay, I'm doing this Clipper thing now. I'm at this different job and they use this FoxPro thing. It looks similar, but then there are things that are different. Can anybody help? Sure, man. What do you need? Show me the stuff. Let's talk. And then part of that story I like telling people, because when people say, see, depending on the version of my business card, I have FoxPro there, and people are like, FoxPro? Jesus, are you still on that? How old are you, man? You know, it's like 2025 now. I like telling the story because I say, you know, back then, we didn't have enough content in Portuguese in Brazil to learn FoxPro. Around that time, I was learning English. Around that time was when internet became a thing in Brazil. So I found an online forum worldwide. I'm like, oh, that's a good way to practice English. So I would see in the online forum, the one in Brazil, people would ask a question. I'm like, that's a heck of a good question. I have no idea what that is. I'm going to translate the question, ask it in English. Now I'm learning, I'm practicing my English, I'm learning that thing in FoxPro, and I'm giving the answer to the folks in Brazil who asked the question. Next thing you know, they think that I'm an expert in FoxPro. Later I told them, I was like, guys, yeah, I was learning with you all. I was just like asking the questions in English and then learning along the way. That's why I say that's where the bulk of my journey started. I'm very thankful for that. Going from FoxPro to .NET, it sustained and grew my career because at some point, Microsoft pretty much killed FoxPro, right? It was not going to be a thing, and I still have so many years, I still had so many years of career in front of me. Going to .NET, it sustained the growth of my career. When I went to Ruby, it evolved my career because that was around the time when I went completely independent. Well, the second time I had gone independent somewhere there, but then I went back to becoming independent, and there I exercised the roles of a product owner, a UX designer, a QA person, a team lead, a team architect. I exercised all of that and talking to the customer to develop a product. They did not have the concept of the product that they wanted. They want, oh, I just need this one thing that's going to push some data into some report, and I need to fetch that data. Like, I don't think that's what you need, right? What they really needed was a system that it was a concussion management system for sports. When concussions became a big thing in the US, they passed laws in all the states that, yeah, in order for a kid who banged their heads playing football, before they go back to gameplay, they have to follow this protocol because of concussion awareness and all that. It was a system for that. And I got to learn about that because I was like asking the questions, like, why this, why that? Can I go talk to those athletic trainers, the coaches that you guys are talking about? And it was huge for me. And I had the community. And here's where another point. Mentorship, peer support, invaluable. If you need to learn something, find people who are passionate about that something. You probably guys, if you haven't heard me before tonight, you probably got the idea that I'm very passionate about testing, automated tests, TDD, BDD. So I can bleed your ears off if you ask me questions about that, because I'm very passionate about it, and I have experience on it, and I know the pain that it was for me to learn. I've helped people who had that pain, right? So whatever it is that you're trying to learn, find people who are passionate about that. Go ask them. They will freely give that because they're passionate about the thing, right? So that was the case for me when I went into Ruby, even though around that time, I had already like 20 years of experience, but in Ruby on Rails, I was a baby. I knew nothing. I had to learn a new language, a new framework, a new operating system, because up to that point I was a PC user for 20 years, and now I'm going into Mac world. It was completely different tools, different terminal, different everything. I had a friend that I got to know in the community, that I met in the community. He would spend like 2-3 hours online with me, dictating character by character that I had to type in my controller, in my Ruby on Rails things. Like, okay, you do this and that, and then this symbol here, and that's, wait, what is that thing? Oh, it's a hash rocket, whatever, that I didn't even know what the name of that symbol was. Like character by character, he was dictating what I had to write for the simplest things possible, right? And eventually I learned, like extremely always, forever thankful. And what I did to like pay forward, then I started like writing articles about helping people, .NET people who are migrating over to Ruby on Rails. Hey guys, here, I just learned these things. This is what was really hard for me to learn, or this is how I made the connection. Okay, in C# is this, in Ruby it's that. In ASP.NET MVC is this, in Ruby on Rails is that. Here, this is what I learned. And I put it out and helped a lot of people. That's what they were looking for. I was by no means a guru on the thing. I mean, far from that, I had just learned that as a baby. I documented that and put it out. Helped other people, right? So that's the point that I put out here, like join user groups, like what you're doing here. Join open source projects, however you want to exercise those. Communities like we have here. There is a community that meets here at Improving. I think their next meeting is Thursday. Side Project Society. If you want to like practice programming things or solving problems, these are people that are sharing problems that they are trying to address. People who have like some sort of idea for a side project. Maybe they have the idea, maybe they have the business expertise, but they don't know how to write the code for that. They have no idea where to start. Maybe you're the person who knows how to write code, but you don't have a good project, so you keep writing hello world. Don't write hello world. Solve somebody's problem. So this is a great user group, really great.
Is that a meetup?
It's a meetup here. Yeah, and there is like a meetup. I think they do have a meetup page. But if you look up Side Project Society, they have a website for that too.
It's the first Thursday, so it's in 2 days.
Right.
3 days.
Is it in person or remote?
In person. That one is in person only.
Okay.
Yeah, because they favor like they do activities, dynamic activities to get everybody to talk about everybody in the room, that they will explain, hey, I'm so-and-so, this is something that I'm trying to achieve. This is a problem that I've identified in the industry. I have the ideas, the know-how, I need somebody to help me with the development, with the legal aspect, with design, they show up and they talk about what they got, right? And many other communities that we have here at Improving. You don't have to be a guru to start sharing stuff, right? If you know that you want to go up the mountain, the guru up there has been there for a while, probably lost track of what feels like to be down here, right? So find other people who are going to the same mountain. Maybe they're going to go all the way up here, and then from here they're going to go someplace else. Oh, that's fine. From here to there, help each other out. Maybe they're paving the way up to there. It's going to be a little bit easier, right? Because those people can relate. The people who are like 5 steps ahead of you, they have just learned the thing. They still know what it feels like not knowing that thing. It's the best time to collaborate there, to relate, right? So leverage that. Some are a few steps ahead and helping pave the way. Others are going through and feeling the same pains as you are. So, go together. It's way more fun. And last but not least, now we're really close. Sorry, my time is completely off on this. Strategic growth and staying relevant. Is there a need to deepen your skills or learn a new language? Right? There are two things there that you may need to leverage. Whatever the answer to that question is, make sure you understand why. Right? Is it a project need? Is it an industry need? What's the situation? Does anybody here remember Silverlight? Microsoft Silverlight. Does anybody remember Microsoft Silverlight light switch? Yeah? So I remember back in the day, I had this one project, or a few projects in Silverlight. Okay, that's fine until it died. And then Microsoft came up before Silverlight died with this technology called light switch. And at the time I had to learn what the thing was and how it worked and everything. And I said, okay, now to prove my proficiency with light switch, I'm going to make a video to make it as part of my resume at how good I am at operating or working with the light switch. Right? And the MSDN t-shirt also as a... Yeah. Yeah. Right? Yeah, the reason why I did that was because so many times I've had situations where I had to be on the bleeding edge of technology and I bled. And it's not fun, right? It is not fun. Unless that's like, if that is solving a certain problem, whatever that problem is, maybe you don't want to just be on the bleeding edge. Maybe just the cutting edge right there before it hurts. Right? So just understand, understand why is it that you need to learn a new thing or deepen your knowledge on a certain thing. If you know why that is important, by all means. So with that, and then of course, everything I learned about like light switch, Silverlight, right, went out of the window because those are no more. Reflect on how skills align with goals. Your goals, the company goals, the community around you goals, and the industry demands. You have to like find a way to match those things and then ponder your journey. Like, okay, I see that the industry is going that way. I see the company where I'm at, the values are the following, and that's how it matches the industry. And then I have my own personal values. How do they all match? Where do I want to go next? If you're a newcomer, do something, anything, learn, rinse and repeat. Because nowadays there are so many options, right? Well, should I do Vue.js or React or Angular? Like, pick one. Just pick one. Do like a little project with it for 3 months or whatever. Document what you've learned. Now do the other thing for another 3 months or a month or whatever. Document. What do you like? What don't you like? What problems does one solve that the other doesn't, right? Document that, reevaluate. Maybe you're at that time in your career where you have to experiment with the different technologies. You don't know yet what they can do, what kind of problems they can solve. So start there, right? Oh, there's this new technology, cool. What problems does it solve? Do I want to spend my time there? Maybe it's like, yeah, I don't relate with that problem. It's not a problem that I normally face. It's not a problem that my company faces, so why should I bother, right? So you have to ask those questions. Are you about to retire? This is something that I've run into a lot going from FoxPro to .NET and then doing the thing that I do, like helping FoxPro developers transition over to .NET. And some folks still had years ahead of them. They were like, oh, thanks for doing that, because I've been in FoxPro for 15 years, and to learn this now C# and .NET is hard. Cool, I've been there, I can help you with that. But then I had some folks who said, Claudio, thank you a lot for the effort in trying to teach me, but I'm about 2 or 3 years away from retiring. I have what I need to get me through, and then right now I just want to learn where I should go buy stuff to go fishing when I retire. Right? Like, you have to, ask yourself, what are your goals? What are your values? What you're trying to achieve in the next, however many years, and then figure it out from there.
There's a catch about to retire. If you want to retire and you go to retirement, miss everything, and say, okay, let me see how much money I'm getting from government. And see that's not enough. And you want to go back and say, oh yes, I want to go back and then work again. So that about to retire. I am first generation of immigrant.
Yeah.
A woman, I met a woman, she's 70, and she said to me, first generation immigrants are never retired. In the United States.
Right, so yeah, you have to ask those questions. Like one thing that happened, I forgot to mention here, when I transitioned over to Ruby on Rails, I spent, I think like 5 or 6 years there, not doing any .NET development, and then people ask me, aren't you afraid that you're gonna like lose your C# chops? I said, well, because of the way I worked when I was in .NET for the first chunk, I was ahead of the curve because with like MVP awards and things like that, I had access to .NET stuff before it came out in public. So I was about like say 2 years ahead as far as the technology is concerned, and I was even more years ahead given the practices that I had. My understanding of solid principles, design patterns, TDD, all of that I was already years ahead of the curve. So I figured I can be away for a number of years, and when I come back, maybe folks are going to be catching up. And that's pretty much what I found. And also what I found is like a lot of folks were still like, it seemed like they falling even further down behind. So like, yeah, like in that case for my career, it worked well that way. Again, because I focused on good patterns, clean code, building empathy with the people I'm serving, solving problems. Everything else is just, yeah, the other stuff I can learn, right? I mean, not be the best C# developer anymore or the best JavaScript. That to me, potatoes, potatoes. It doesn't make any difference, right? At least for the things that I value, my goals. Questions before I wrap up with just a few bullet points? No questions, only concerns. Sorry, let's start here.
Long question, long answer, but how do you learn? To me, that's the most important thing.
How do I learn?
How to learn.
Yes.
I have a particular process that I use to learn new things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions on that?
So there's a whole thing like different people learn different ways,
Yes.
right? Something that I've learned when I first moved to the US, one of my first group things that I did with coworkers was to grab a book and study for a .NET certification. It was a way that I figured like, oh, we are all learning and using this .NET thing.
Sure.
How about we all get together once a week and we pick up the same book and we learn together? Let's do it? Sure.
Okay.
And then what I noticed there, so that's a great way to learn, like get some accountability partners there, people who are working on the same thing, not necessarily with the same goal. Like my goal was not to get the certification, was to get to know how my coworkers thought so I could collaborate with them better. That was what I wanted to get out of it. It so happens that we were studying the same contents. What I learned there that I didn't realize was that some folks needed to put the book down and do like the sample code, like they had to write line by line and try and run and do. That didn't, because that's how they learned, right? They need to learn by doing it. For me, it's more like I map out the book, I go from back to back, like fast reading, so that I map out in my mind and I know what's there, what I'm gonna find. And then I go through the pages, I read relatively quickly, I stop in spots where it's like, here, I need to slow down here because it either immediately applies to something that I'm doing, or it applies to something that's like, oh, next week I'm going to be working on a user story that this thing here, I think I can leverage that. Other stuff is like, I don't think I will ever need this stuff. So if I'm going to be taking a certification test, if that's my goal, it's like I'm just going to memorize whatever, you know, in that case, Microsoft wants to hear as the answer, and then I take the test, and then I'm done. So for me, it works well like that. I like going through contents and having a good system, so I take good notes so that for me, I don't want to retain that information, all of that information. Like a lot of folks like, oh, how do you remember everything you read? It's like, I don't. That would be crazy. What I want to remember is, when I need that information in the future, how can I find it again? So that's how I've been refining my system. So I have a system where, as I write down these notes, I put like, okay, today, if I want to recall that information, this is how I associate. After a while, I revise that system and I update those things that I used to recall that information.
That's one of the questions, one of the answers I'm asking. What tool do you use for that? My example is bookmarks. I have a bookmarking system that's $22 a year, and I have 25,000 bookmarks, but I can find anything that I've never found before.
So it goes back to the tools are good, but processes are better. So I started this process maybe, I'd say about 25 years ago. So the process I've been refining, tools I've used so many. Whatever the best tool was at the time.
You mentioned that you keep track of where you found stuff.
So
what
today,
you use for that.
So for over 12 or 13 years, I've used Evernote.
There you go.
For the last 2 to 3 years, I've been using Obsidian. Okay? So I continue to use Evernote as a way to keep data and information. When I'm ready to turn that information into knowledge and insight, I hop over to Obsidian. It's a better tool for that.
That's part of the answer I was looking for.
Yeah.
What tools do you use to keep track of your learning? So,
okay, and now there's some resources I'm going to be sharing here that you might benefit from that.
Okay. Obsidian is freemium, isn't it?
Yes, so yeah, it's free for the most part. I got the paid subscription for a better cloud syncing, because I want to access that in different devices. Then the paid version is just better at syncing the data.
Okay. What tools do you use? I'm using Pinboard for my bookmarking. I've also used Evernote. I'm thinking right now I think I'm going to be using Notion. Actually, it's a fairly new one, and it's similar to Evernote, I think.
It's similar to all of them. Yeah. So when I was, as I said, I used Evernote for maybe 12 years after using Microsoft OneNote and Lotus Organizer back in the day and all that stuff. What was before Outlook? Schedule Plus, right? I use all of them. Then Evernote, and when Evernote started, like, it's just, they started making some changes that I'm like, I don't like where they're going with that.
It got pretty complicated.
Yeah. So I started looking at other things. I looked at Obsidian, I looked at Notion, and another one, I don't remember which one. You know, the number one reason why I didn't go with Notion is because they call the thing where you store your stuff database.
Oh, okay.
Why does that bother me?
Why?
Is because it's like, I don't want to store stuff in my database. I want to store knowledge. It's a different concept. Let me tell you, the reason why that's a big thing for me is because the people who are building Notion, they are thinking everything in terms of databases, which is the thing that's how I used to think. I used to see the world in tabular form. I would be in a conversation, people would be saying, customers, products, sales orders, one too many too many, the following columns. Because, I'm thinking in databases from the ground up. I don't want that anymore. I want to distance myself from that. And the fact that the people behind the tool think that way, it means that they're still thinking from that perspective. So that kind of like, that turned me off. And then looking at the things that they're doing with Obsidian and the things that I found, is like, it's not about the tool, it's about the process. So because I have my process the way it is, I can hop over to Notion, to the other tools that are coming up.
Well,
It's not about the tool.
It's the process, but I would, I got it.
Yeah, I'll share some of the, I have some video content of some of the things that I'm doing with Obsidian as far as like, I read a lot of books and a lot of my information, knowledge, insights come from books. How do I retain that information? So I have a whole system in Obsidian to help me with that.
More importantly is how do you find it again?
Yes.
That's the question.
And that's the part that I keep refining, because the way I find something today, a year from now, it's going to change. Because maybe I'm just learning a concept, like, oh, today I learned that I have to learn this Angular thing.
Sure.
Angular, okay, Angular. 6 months from now, I may think, oh, it's a front-end library.
Right.
It's a different concept in my mind. So as part of my process, like every quarter, every 6 months or so, I look back at my tags, the way I organize things, and I ask myself, is that still how I think of that concept? Because if the way I think about it has evolved, I want to refine my system so that it matches how I've evolved. Right? Cool. Sorry, there was another question by the gentleman there. Yeah. I got very excited about the. Sorry, you had a question there.
What do you use to make the presentation?
Obsidian.
Obsidian?
How's that? How's that?
Thank you.
No problem.
Is that AI image generator?
Not this one. A few of the images, like not this one, not this one, not this one. This one is. So what I use for images for talks, like something like this, I had a very specific thing in my mind. So I explained to ChatGPT, this is what I'm trying to convey, make an image with. After a few iterations, it got to something like, okay, I can speak to this, right? For other things, like, yeah, for this, I use pixabay.com. It's a free site, stock images like that. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'll be around for a little while for other questions if they come up. Remember, problem solving is important. Communication, continuous learning. That's what you need to keep your career going. I have a YouTube channel. Check out two things. This Lassala.net spoken blog is essentially a spoken version of my blog that I started creating. Here I have right now 3 episodes where I documented how I created this talk. From the request when Terence talked to you, how I did a brain dump of what I thought this talk could cover, dumped it into ChatGPT, and then how I used it to create the title, create the takeaways, create the outline, create the initial presentation in Obsidian with this plugin that I use for Obsidian. I'm talking about it here. This other one, Steady Cycling, is where I have a whole bunch of videos talking about my book reading process, like how I select books, how I track them, how I process them, and how I create maps to understand how I connect books in my head, because that evolves over time. So that's where I explain a lot of the my process on that. Improving, we have under our website, our thoughts area where we have blogs and webinars and a whole bunch of stuff related to AI software development, so make sure to check that out. And last but not least, please scan that. I'm going to be creating some more contents that I didn't get to cover here because it's like, yeah, I went way over time and there's more content that I've prepared that I'm not going to be able to present. So if you're interested in receiving some of that content, that's how I'm going to be able to contact you and say, hey, there's a new something about that topic you guys saw me talk about. Access to?
Yeah, it's not public, so it prompts for access.
Oh, I thought I had made that public. That's weird. So it's, what was it, Google Forms? Was it Google Forms? Should be there somewhere. And this guy. Oh, it says it's published.
Specific people.
Oh. Okay, where do I change? Responder, anyone with a link.
Got it.
Sorry guys, I did not realize that before. There you go.
That's great. Thank you, Claudio.
Thank you.
It's very good
Awesome.
thing, and
Thanks,
I
Ash.
have a lot of questions.
Yeah? I mean, I can be here for a little more.
About things that you're passionate tests and
Oh,
and
yeah.
to make new presentation
Yeah.
and I think we have great resource here in improving, and Claudio is one of the resources we use.
Yeah.
There are hosts. We are thankful. Code4Y'all are thankful for that.
My pleasure.
We can work with them. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Claudio. It's-
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.